My name's Gary Blackford, and this is part of my social justice assignment. And I have with me today Caleb Dwyer, who's the director of the Horizon Project, NGO, that's doing some great things throughout the world. So, welcome, Caleb.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you along. I've just got a couple of questions for you, just to talk about the Horizon Project. Now, one of the things you do advertise is you say that you're a grassroots organisation that's supported by a lot of networks and individuals and churches, and just explain that a little bit more to us.
Sure. Especially in terms of the work that we do internationally.
Yes.
So in country, we work very closely with local churches, and sometimes partnering also with some third-party NGOs, where we can be very flexible. We can change and respond according to need on the ground.
Okay.
As quickly as possible. Being a smaller organisation as opposed to some of the larger NGOs, there's incredible things that the large NGOs do.
Yes.
But one of the great things of being a little bit smaller and a little bit more focused in what we do, you don't have the different layers of bureaucracy to worry about.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where the concept of the grassroots thing comes into it, where there's quick feedback from what's happening on the ground to if we need to shift something.
Yeah.
So we saw this with the earthquake in Nepal. We have a presence in Nepal, and we were very quickly able to respond. We were able to respond to needs that we knew through trusted networks on the ground. So people that were already in villages, in communities, already working with people, established relationships, were very quickly able to feed back to us and give us up-to-date information on what we'd be able to do.
So these were Nepali?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yep.
Yep. So Nepalese organisations and individuals that we work with.
Okay, so just with that, like after the earthquakes, which were, the world saw what happened, just give me an example of how that looked. Like what was something that happened that you were able to take action on quickly?
Yeah, so one of the things was a whole lot of money was sent, which was brilliant. What are we going to do with it? What are we going to do? What's actually needed on the ground today? There was, do we send people over to help start to rebuild and to rescue and all these sort of things? So we were able to leave that to the professionals that know what they're doing in those areas. But very quickly word got back to us that one of the problems was that the weather was going to change and the rainy season was going to come, and we don't have time to rebuild, but what we desperately need is shelter in the short term. Yeah. So we were very quickly actually able to work with some people in India and combining with the guys into Nepal and get emergency aid and tents. And,
fantastic.
And things. So it's just one of the beauties at the moment. It's relationships within organisations, and being able to communicate quickly about what's happening in a situation like that. That is, I think it's probably one of our strengths. Because you play to your strengths. There's other things that we can't do that some of the larger NGOs can do.
Yeah.
Obviously in terms of just the bulk and of supply that they might have, or even the expertise that they're able to get in different situations.
Yes, yeah.
And we're careful not to get involved in things that we can't.
Yeah. So you see, like there's a would you say, I guess, a niche? Would you
say that's probably fair?
Yeah.
Certainly in our ongoing work, there's some niche things that we're getting involved in, but it's just that speed of delivery and quick changes when things need to change on the ground.
Okay, and you find as the director of the organisation, you're getting you're working with a group here in Australia, and you're making decisions, but then you're able to outplay them quite quickly on the ground in Nepal, India, and Africa as well.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So just in a CEO summary, give me a vision.
Sure. Creating change that remains.
Change that remains, which is a really nice little play on words, isn't it? Yeah, because it's change and remains.
Yeah. And the idea is empowering communities and individuals within communities. Yeah. Self-governance is really important to us.
Which is interesting, because you're in a let's just leave Africa aside. If you just say in Nepal, the whole religious mix of Nepal and India in particular, especially now. How does that play out? Let's just stick with Nepal. We might as well. With the the Hindu nature and like the religious side of it.
Yep. So there's certain things we can and can't do with inside the legal framework,
Yeah.
and there's certain things that we can and can't talk about.
So tell me, what sort of things are those? Or can you say?
Yeah, there's certain things I can and can't talk about.
Okay. Fair enough.
But certainly, so with inside the framework of NGO work, absolutely, we can do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And you can be using local churches, and you can be using Christian people on the ground.
Yeah.
That, in a similar way that we do in Australia. I know in our church we have a manager of Lifeline is in our church, and she does incredible work through this secular organisation. But she carries her faith, and she carries that into that world. Yeah. And obviously there are rules and there are things that you have to abide by. But I think sometimes we get so freaked out about that and decide we can't do anything.
Yes.
We're just go and be present. So, so the children's work that we do in Nepal, we are very passionate about delivering the best services that we can. Yeah. So we are registered with all the relevant government bodies in Nepal for the children work, and we can be spot audited at any time. Okay. And they can actually go through our home and make sure that we're not indoctrinating the children with Christianity.
Okay.
But that's fine. We don't have to necessarily do that when our volunteers are Christians, yes. And they're showing the kids the love of Jesus, and they can tell the kids about the youth ministry up the road that the kids are more than welcome to go to, and they can help the kids get there. Yeah. So there's this separation, but you're in the space. You're invading that space. Yeah,
and there's light, isn't it? Exactly. You're bringing light to whatever situation you're walking into.
And the alternative is that you pull away from those protections that are built in. So, for example, we're really passionate when it comes to children's work. Wherever possible, one of our goals is to resettle a child back in the community. Okay. Certainly, if we can find out that child actually has a parent alive. Yeah. Now, it might be unsafe to immediately resettle that child back into community. And so we're now developing networks and social workers and training that are actually able to help improve the situation of that family, that a child can be placed back into community. Okay. Now again, so this is world best practice, and we're passionate about that, and by engaging with the government registries and so on, it forces your hand. But we're cool with that because we want to be best practice. Yeah. We say that if you just pull away and do it all independently and you try and fly under the radar, now obviously there are nations, there are times when you have to. And there are things, as I said, that we do that we don't talk about. But with this sort of work, if you're present, and they know that you're a Christian, they certainly know that our guys on the ground are Christians, and they're not hiding it, but we're following the rules. But what it actually enables us to do, even in resettling children now, no longer do you have a child out of community, but you're caring for a child and their family in community, and you have Christian social workers going and working with them and helping them and talking to them and letting them know about the other Christian networks around and what they can do. And so it's an invasive, absolutely.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you about something, because like sitting here in Australia, Western culture, certainly gender is quite like how females are respected in, just say, a developing nation rather than a developed nation. How does that play out in, like, for instance, the bringing of the young girls into the welfare?
Sure.
Yeah. How is it different than the boys? Yeah.
I guess a lot of it's cultural.
Yeah.
And that's important to be respected.
Yes.
Excuse me. A culture in and of itself is not necessarily innately good or innately evil.
Yeah.
There are good things in culture, and there are things that don't line up. Anything that doesn't line up with the culture of heaven is an issue, whether we're speaking Western culture or whether we're speaking Nepali culture. So for us, there are definite things that we try and be very respectful and thoughtful, and a lot of it is working with locals. We're not trying to westernise these guys.
Yes,
there are certain things that we have in the West that we have to offer, but there are certain things, and I would suggest that certainly my experience in a lot of the Nepali communities, the way they do community, oh boy, we could learn from that. Absolutely. Yeah. And the way they do family. And so there's things there where you want to be very careful and sensitive, and the way, what you might discuss. We're pretty liberal and open in our languages and our conversation between male and female, etc. there'd be certain things that I would not discuss with the female as openly.
Yes.
But we have females that will go and do that.
Mm.
So there are some things that you respect, and then there's some things you actually really stand against. And I just think that the empowerment of women through education, and it has to be relevant education.
Because this is one of the keys, isn't it? This is one of the keys that, especially with bringing the children in and the education side of it, it's more the empowering to become leaders in the nation,
Absolutely.
Isn't it? And that's from experience, that's not necessarily caught in one gender, is it? That's, we're talking about empowering the young women,
Absolutely.
To become leaders in Nepal,
Absolutely,
in the future.
Yeah, and that's how you break stereotypes and glass ceilings and barriers and all those things and cultural change. It happens over time.
Yeah.
But I think education is a vital part of it. The education that's tangible, education that can actually make a difference in community today, and appropriate to the individual needs. But also, and you touched on it, independent, creative, educated, powerful women. All the projects that we do, we talk about autonomy, ultimately, and exit strategies. We won't start a project now without an exit strategy.
Yeah.
How are we actually going to help these people become independent? And often it's about helping them help themselves. They already want to do it.
Yeah.
It can just be a bit of direction or a bit of financing, or sometimes the best part of my world is when I just get to connect different people on the ground, and off they go.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you leave strong, independent, autonomous people. It's not about us controlling, it's not about us dictating, it's not about us westernising.
Or being a welfare agency.
Yeah.
Really, in a way. Like, if that is required for a while to help, but it's like a drawing in, a helping, a launching out,
Absolutely.
rather than a just, we'll just look after you.
Yes. It disempowers.
Yes, as welfare has proven to do.
Absolutely. And I think well-meaning organisations have and sometimes still continue. And there's probably things that we do. We're constantly trying to look and learn. And can we do things better? Are we overstepping some boundaries there? Well, we're certainly not perfect. We're growing and changing all the time. But I just think it's actually a core value of ours as Christians, is this idea that we would actually be empowering people for choice. And hopefully in that choice they do choose relationship with Jesus, and wherever appropriate and we're able to, we make those sort of things clear. Yeah. But it's got to be their choice.
Yes.
So, and that's again, I think that's a key reason where we won't put restrictions, or you have to come to the church, or you have to do this before you can access our programs.
Yeah.
We value them as a human.
Yes, yeah.
Irrespective of whether they're Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, come and access our programs and experience the love of Jesus.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Caleb.
And you give them the choice.
Yeah.
Because God gave us choice. And ultimately, the end result of taking away choice is you take away love, because you can't have love without choice.
Yes, yeah.
And if we're there to show love, but we're taking people's choices away from them,
it doesn't make sense, does it?
That doesn't.
So being a relatively small NGO at this stage, what would you say is one of your biggest challenges?
Probably working through some of that complexity.
Okay. Bureaucratic complexity in nations, or?
Sure. Definitely. On the ground, complexity can be really challenging. But also just, what is world's best practice in this space? Okay. You go to a country like Nepal and moving Christians especially away from this model of a orphanage. We're now seeing it develop where they're more a welfare centre, but we're trying now to work with organisations to take that step further, where they're more of like a transition centre. Yeah. Where, a child comes and is protected and is given and is assessed and is given, whatever it is that they need at that point in time. But automatically, our objective is not, tick a box when a child's placed into a centre. We celebrate most when a child is placed back in the community.
And launched into everything they can become.
And with a family around them and everything that a child should have. But that's really complicated to do. Like, how do you make sure that you're putting back in the right families? How do you make sure that your welfare workers are actually trained? And what we find is often in countries like Nepal, where children's welfare has actually become an industry. And part of that industry is a Christian industry. where people are going, well, it's really hard to get people to give to my church, but boy, if I whack a children's home on the side of it, the Westerns will give to that. And well-meaning, and they will give to it. And so you're trying to change some of those mindsets as well. And you look around and there's not a lot of Christian organisations doing it in a country like Nepal. So there's just challenges with that. But that's where we engage with larger organisations, like ACCI, who are just brilliant at coming alongside and educating and helping and empowering us to do what we believe we're called to do.
Because that's been a fairly large step, hasn't it, for you as and we've been on this journey for a while together. But to come from that, I guess, an isolated. Isolated may not be the right word because it's going to different countries, but as a relatively small NGO, but then engaging in a larger organisation. So what out of doing that, what would be the biggest benefit that you've received?
Knowledge.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And best practice.
Okay.
And networks. Access to people on the ground that are doing it and doing it better. And proper research behind your practices. So guys like ACCI can open the doors up to that.
Yeah.
And there's people within their organisation that have done research for these types of things. And it's realising that your objective, that they're not questioning your objective. They're trying to improve your methodology.
Yeah.
And if you're okay with that, then you'll engage with these organisations.
Which is one of the key things, because we can have the theology behind it, and the grounded theology, and the taking the gospel throughout the world, and to preach it, and but that's the methodology behind the theology. So that's changed significantly.
Yeah, well, the hesitancy for us, I think, is sometimes the way that those larger organisations have presented what they want to do. So. If we're not careful, and we now find it, so I'm passionate about this stuff, so I'm talking to people, and I'll come across people and I'll be like, oh, well, our church has its own orphanage and we're doing this and we're doing that. And I'll go there with them about, well, what are you doing? Are you just keeping kids in an orphanage, or are you actually trying to resettle into family and into community? And have you thought about this? And but it's how we frame that conversation, because they're no doubt responding to something God stirred in their heart.
Yeah.
And if we don't frame the conversation right, people feel that we're questioning what God said to them. Yeah. What God birthed in their heart. And, you've got to be that stubborn to even get something off the ground in one of these countries. That you're not going to give up on that. But if you can frame the conversation and say, hey, I don't want to question what God's called you to do. If God's called you to help kids in whatever country, let's do it. If God's helped you to support women out of the sex trade, let's do it. Yeah. But let's actually do the best models. Let's look for the best practice in the world today, and let that be what Christianity becomes known for, not Christianity that pulls away from that stuff and becomes isolated and stuff.
In some ways it's harder, isn't it, to like you're saying, you're going in with an exit strategy, and you're also looking at so for some ways it's easy just to throw some money at something, employ a couple of people, and just feed them. Feed the hungry. That's yes, we should do that. But to go to that next series of steps, to see that child as not just another struggling child that needs our help, but someone who can be launched into transforming a nation, and to go through the process and walk that out. There's a lot more involved, isn't there?
It is complex.
Yeah.
And that's reality. And that's why I think, for us, our greatest advantage, we're quick.
Yeah.
We can respond to things like the earthquake really quickly. Our greatest threat, or our greatest weakness, is the complexity to do it well and do it properly, especially these long-term projects. And so what do we do about that? Well, for us, we think the perfect solution we've found is to engage with third-party organisations that are able to give us the knowledge that we need, that are willing to come alongside us and help us get better at what we do, and ultimately work together.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's fun.
Yeah, it's an adventure.
Yeah, it is. It is, and you get the wins along the way, and you see. We've actually got a young girl at the moment she's launching what we call a House of Promise, which is short-term stay, then community-based care for girls coming out of the sex trafficking industry. And she actually was a child who accessed our services as a young child. Now she's got 2 university degrees. And so what she is creating, we're seeking third-party help and information. And so from the very beginning, she's rolling it out at best practice. But she's come through, and so you're seeing this multiple generational effect now. And you sit back and go,
yeah, that's really what we're after.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she just shares Jesus with everyone without having to break rules or anything. She is Jesus.
She is.
And she can talk to them, and when they ask her about her faith, she's welcome to share.
Yeah. Do everything to preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Caleb, thank you very much.
Thank you,
my friend, for
Pleasure.
coming and being part of this. And it's a great joy to see what you're doing.
No worries,
and
thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very good.